Hello everyone, welcome to IS 300. Today we're talking about security as a service. This is domain 13 in the Security Guidance White Paper written by the Cloud Security Alliance. In this week's discussion, we will talk about an introduction, an overview, including the potential benefits and concerns, and some recommendations. Security as a service is specific to cloud environments that offer security bundled, traditional security that we all are familiar with as a service, products or services that are delivered as a cloud service that meet the characteristics of the National Institute of Science and Technology. The benefits, of course, it's cheaper, reduced capital expenses, flexible, redundant, highly available, and resilient. Then you also have the benefit of security experts, which you may not normally have in traditional environments. You have the ability to share intelligence because you have more than one customer, multiple customers in some cases, and their expertise can be shared through all of the different organizations that are represented by that cloud service provider. Flexible deployments because of virtualization, the insulation of the clients and the protection of the clients, and the ability to what they have referred to in the text as pay as you grow. So as the needs increase, the security capabilities can also increase. Potential concerns, on the other hand, are the lack of visibility. The customer may or may not know where their data is stored and what security provisions are in place. This is where a service level agreement becomes real important. Differences, geographic differences, there may be different regulations in different areas, and so some of the regulations may or may not be enforceable outside of certain jurisdictions. The handling of regulated data, particularly personal information. If you're talking about banking industries, insurance industries, there are regulations that must be adhered to, and how those are adhered to is now an issue that has to be considered by the security as a service provider. Data leakage because of litigation, law enforcement investigations, or other discovery situations which require that the server be handed over and all of its contents, which means then that all of the virtual machines on that provider's equipment, hardware, particularly servers, may be exposed. Changing to a new provider, they talk about something called data lock-in, which means if you change providers, you may lose some of the historical data that has been captured. Migrating to a new security as a service provider is also something that has to be handled very carefully. Some of the major categories of services that are offered are identity entitlement and access management services. In previous chapters, there was a discussion about an entitlement matrix, which simply specifies who has access to what information, what policies, and what permissions are available. Also, with the identity, of course, identity can be another service, a generic term that covers one or more services for primarily policies, policy enforcement, policy decision points, policy access points, and things like multi-factor authentication. Another service offering is something called a federated identity broker. A federated identity broker is a service provider that brokers access control between multiple service providers also referred to as relying parties. Federal identity management is simply an arrangement between two or more brokers across organizations that will then rely upon a web-based single sign-on. So when you sign on through one service, it gives you access as far as your permissions and control and policies are allowed. It gives you access to other services, and the federated identity broker manages that access. Cloud access and security brokers will monitor activity, event logs, and things of that nature, enforce policies, and detect or prevent security issues. A cloud access security broker, also known as a cloud security gateway, intercepts communications that may or may not be directed towards a cloud service and connect to a service through an application programming interface, and then allows for monitoring, enforcement, detection, prevention, and things of that nature. Web security, of course, maybe there's a software or an appliance that can redirect web traffic to the cloud provider. It gives you an added layer of protection, and it enforces policy rules. Email security, of course, is critical. Inbound and outbound email then can be protected through the use of this cloud security as a service provider. It can protect an organization from phishing, scams, and malicious attacks. Links that are malware that users might click on that they receive through an email are prevented. Corporate policies that define acceptable use and or spam prevention, and also business continuity. What happens if there is a disaster? Third-party customer-driven audits may be provided by the security as a service provider. Three main categories of security assessments: traditional security, vulnerability, risk management, risk assessment kind of activities, looking for patches and or machines that have not been patched on or off premises. Application security assessments, making sure that the applications don't have any embedded APIs that are credentials that are written into an application. Cloud platform assessment tools that can connect directly with a cloud service to look at the assets that have been deployed and how they are configured as well. Web application firewalls, like traditional firewalls, will redirect or block traffic, filter traffic before it passes from a source to a destination web application, preventing certain traffic from getting through, which is what a firewall does. You also have intrusion detection and prevention, which looks at patterns. Heuristic simply means trial and error. So it might look at patterns. It may try to see what works, what doesn't work, to detect anomalies, which might prevent risks. Security information and event management analyzes real-time reports and alerts that might require intervention. You can automate security information and event management by using triggers that will then, if there is an alert or some sort of an event that occurs, it will either notify, generate an alert, an alarm, notify an administrator, prevent an application from continuing to run. All kinds of capabilities can be written into security information and event management services. Encryption, of course. Public and private keys can be managed through security as a software offerings, so that, again, you can manage the encryption and the public and private keys that are part of the encryption, making sure that data is encrypted, the important data is encrypted. Maybe not necessary to encrypt rather all data, but the critical data, the data that that must be encrypted, then can be managed through the Security as a Service cloud provider. Backup and recovery, or business continuity and disaster recovery, backup and restore capabilities. If there is a natural disaster or some sort of an emergency, data is backed up to the cloud so that data is not lost. The cloud service is the final repository for worst case scenarios or for archiving should there be some sort of disaster. Traditional security management capabilities, agent management. For example, for network monitoring and for applications that have an agent that is part of the application, how are those agents managed? Network security, of course, mobile devices becomes a big issue because the ability for users to bring their own devices, use their own devices, mobile devices, smartphones, tablets, and things like that, now have to be protected even if the user on the other end of the mobile device is not aware of the security that needs to be enforced. It can be enforced by the Security as a Service provider. Distributed denial of service protection. So distributed denial of service attacks are those attacks that bombard a server, a network, and try to bring that network down by sending multiple packets that eventually will disrupt or bring a server down. Denying that traffic, intercepting that traffic before it can affect the infrastructure, is what distributed denial of service protection is all about.